I found a shoebox full of handwritten stories in my deceased grandmother's attic last month. Every single story in that box has come true in the exact way she described. And according to the dates on the pages, she wrote them all 20 years before they happened. My grandmother Clara passed away in October, leaving me her small house in Salem, Oregon. I'd always been close to her, but there were things about her that the family whispered about. How she always seemed to know when someone was going to call before the phone rang. How she'd cancel plans at the last minute because she had a feeling something bad was going to happen. How she'd wake up in the middle of the night and drive to a relative's house, arriving just in time to help with some unexpected crisis. The family called it intuition. Clara called it a gift she wished she didn't have. I'd been putting off cleaning out her attic for weeks. It was cramped up there, filled with decades of collected memories, and the November air made the small space feel like a tomb. I was sorting through old photo albums and Christmas decorations when I found the shoebox tucked behind a stack of National Geographic magazines from the 1980s. The box was plain brown cardboard, held together with rubber bands that cracked when I tried to remove them. Inside were maybe 30 or 40 sheets of paper, all covered in my grandmother's careful handwriting. At first glance, they looked like short stories or creative writing exercises. The first page I picked up was dated March 15th, 1995, and titled The Night Shift Nurse. It told the story of a woman named Patricia who worked the overnight shift at Mercy General Hospital in Portland. According to the story, Patricia would disappear one night during her shift, and her body would be found 3 days later in the hospital's abandoned tuberculosis wing. I remembered that story. It had been all over the news in March of 2015, exactly 20 years after the date on my grandmother's page. A nurse named Patricia Morales had vanished during her night shift at Mercy General. They found her body in the old TB ward that had been sealed off since the 1970s. The police never figured out how she'd gotten in there or what had happened to her. My hand started shaking as I picked up another page. This one was dated June 8th, 1997, titled The Family on Elm Street. It described a house fire that would kill a family of 4 in Bend, Oregon. The father would try to save his children but wouldn't make it out. The mother would survive but spend the rest of her life in a psychiatric facility, convinced that someone had deliberately set the fire. I pulled out my phone and searched for news articles about house fires in Bend. There it was, June 8th, 2017, the Henderson family. 4 dead, 1 survivor. The mother, Sarah Henderson, had been institutionalized after claiming repeatedly that she'd seen someone pouring gasoline around the house moments before the fire started. The police found no evidence of arson. Story after story, I cross-referenced them with news reports, obituaries, police records. Every single one had happened exactly as my grandmother had written, down to the smallest details. Names, dates, locations, everything matched perfectly. How was that possible? How could anyone predict specific events 20 years in the future with such accuracy? And why had my grandmother never told anyone about this ability? I found a story dated September 12th, 1999, titled The Missing College Student. It described a girl named Amanda who would disappear from Oregon State University. Her car would be found in the campus parking garage, keys still in the ignition, but she would never be seen again. The story included details about Amanda's appearance, her major, even the clothes she had been wearing the night she vanished. I searched for missing persons cases at OSU. Amanda Reeves disappeared September 12th, 2019. Psychology major, last seen wearing a red hoodie and jeans. Car found in the parking garage with the engine still running. The case was still open. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. At the bottom of Amanda's story, my grandmother had written a single line in different ink, like she'd added it later. Check the storm drain behind the library. Third grate from the east entrance. I stared at that line for a long time, my heart pounding against my ribs. My grandmother had been dead for a month. Amanda Reeves had been missing for 2 years. If there was even a chance that this information could help find her, I called the OSU Police Department the next morning, but how do you explain something like this? I told them I was researching cold cases for a true crime podcast and had a tip about Amanda Reeves. They were polite but dismissive until I mentioned the specific location. 2 days later, Detective Morrison called me back. They'd found Amanda's remains in the storm drain system, exactly where my grandmother had indicated. The detective wanted to know how I'd known to look there. I couldn't tell him the truth. Instead, I said I'd found some old notes in my grandmother's belongings, that she'd been interested in the case. It wasn't entirely a lie, but the night, alone in my apartment, I went through every remaining story in the box with a growing sense of dread. Most of them described events that had already happened. Tragedies my grandmother had somehow foreseen decades before they occurred. But there were 3 stories dated in the early 2000s that described events scheduled for the near future. One was dated February 3rd, 2025, just 2 months away. The story dated February 3rd, 2025 was titled The Man in Apartment 4B. It described a building collapse in downtown Portland that would kill 17 people. According to my grandmother's account, the building would collapse at 2:47 a.m. due to a gas leak that no one detected in time. She'd written detailed descriptions of the victims, their ages, their occupations, even their names. What made it worse was that I recognized the address. It was my apartment building. I was listed in the story. Thomas Mitchell, age 28, 4th floor, apartment 4B, killed instantly when the building's east wall collapsed. I read that page over and over, looking for some detail that might be different, some sign that this story was less accurate than the others. But my grandmother had gotten my apartment number right. My age would be correct in February, and she'd even described the layout of my living room down to the placement of my couch. The logical part of my brain insisted this was all coincidence. There was no way someone could predict the future with this kind of accuracy. But the evidence was overwhelming. 37 stories, 37 events that had happened exactly as described, 20 years to the day after my grandmother had written them. I tried to convince myself to ignore it. Maybe I was losing my mind from grief. Maybe I was seeing patterns that weren't really there. But every night I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the building's old pipes and wondering if I was hearing the first signs of a gas leak. I started sleeping at my girlfriend Sarah's place, making excuses about why I couldn't stay at my apartment. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was just delaying the inevitable. If my grandmother's stories were truly prophetic, then maybe there was no escaping what was written. That's when I found the letter. It was tucked inside the back cover of the shoebox, written in my grandmother's handwriting, but dated just 1 month before her death. It was addressed to me. Tommy, it began. If you're reading this, then you've found my stories, and you probably think I was crazy. I don't blame you. I spent most of my life thinking the same thing. The visions started when I was your age. At first, they came in dreams, vivid, detailed dreams about terrible things that would happen to people I'd never met. I tried to ignore them, but then the first one came true exactly as I dreamed it. Then another and another. I learned to write them down, to document everything I saw. I thought maybe if I recorded them, they'd stop haunting me. But they never stopped. For 60 years, I've carried the burden of knowing about tragedies I couldn't prevent. I tried to warn people once. In 1987, I called the police and told them about a school bus accident I'd seen in a vision. They thought I was a crank caller. When it happened exactly as I'd described, they investigated me as a suspect. I never tried to intervene again. The gift or curse seems to run in our family. Your great-grandmother had it too, though she never talked about it. I've been watching you, Tommy, and I've seen the signs. The way you sometimes know things before they happen, the dreams that feel too real. If you're reading this letter, it means the stories have started coming to you too. You'll want to fight it to deny what's happening, but you can't. The best you can do is learn to live with it, but there's something else you need to know. The stories aren't set in stone. They show what will happen if nothing changes. But sometimes, rarely, they can be altered. I was never brave enough to try, but maybe you will be. The building collapse you've probably read about by now. It doesn't have to happen. The gas leak starts small in the basement utility room, a loose fitting on the main line. If someone were to report a gas smell to the utility company 3 days before the date in the story, they'd find the leak and fix it. I couldn't save those people in my other visions, Tommy, but maybe you can save yourself and your neighbors. Maybe that's why this gift skipped a generation and came to you instead of your mother. Maybe you're stronger than